Hey everyone, for episode 64 of the Rental Roundtable, we had on Ben Bradshaw, Executive Vice President of North American Sales at Genie. First time we've had an OEM on the show. He's third generation in the equipment space, 23 years. Talked about how he started as a yard guy and got moved all the way up to Executive Vice President at Genie. Talked about what he's learned from working at the Nationals, particularly what makes great sales reps in the rental industry. Talked a lot about that and talked a lot about where the industry is going and how the independents can stand out and fight against the nationals who have a lot of resources and capital, and particularly what you should do, but more importantly, what you should not do if you're an independent rental company. So, a really fun episode with Ben. Hope you guys enjoy. All right, everyone. Welcome to the Rental Roundtable, episode 64. We have Ben Bradshaw. He's the Executive Vice President of North American Sales at Genie. Ben, welcome to the show today.
Kyle, thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to get on here and chat with you.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. I'm man, I'm a little embarrassed. I don't have any trophies behind me like you do with the golf and I know they're not all yours, but I like the background. Very professional.
Yeah, no, I wish I could say I won the trophy in the baseball. It's not even. It's actually a branch I ran when I was relocating. The team that got me. I'm a big Oakland A's baseball fan, so they had all signed the baseball kind of as like a MVP as I was taking off. So I kept it over the years. So I wish the trophy I could say I won it for my good golf skills, but that's not the case. I'm essentially a holding yard for everybody else on my team that won it.
Yeah, I love it. And Oakland A's fan. I don't. You must be a pretty dedicated type of person to be an Oakland A's fan. They don't
Yeah,
have always the best team every year.
it's tough, right? Baseball season. All my friends, I'm on a group thread talking about Milwaukee Brewers and San Diego Padres and Dodgers, and here I am an Oakland A's fan, and it's we get one win and I'm excited. So it's been tough to cheer for the A's for quite some time, but I'm a diehard. I've got in my closet, I've got everything from the Philadelphia Athletics to the Kansas City Athletics to the Oakland Athletics, every hat in the lineage of the team, and looking forward to when they move to Vegas. It's a much closer commute, and I think it'll be a much better stadium. So I'm excited for that move. But right now, it's tough to be an Oakland A's fan.
Yeah, that stadium's been rough. The whole Moneyball movement, right? That they started with, I think, Billy Beane, and then they brought him. They're part of those guys over from the Red Sox, and it's cool what they did on the analytics side, right? They were the first organization to really look at, hey, let's not just like put our finger in the wind and go, that guy can hit and that guy can't, but all the analytics they did as an advantage, which is now sort of talking about big data and AI. That's like every industry is happening, but in the baseball world, they were the pioneers and had a lot of success on a very limited budget for what they were doing.
No, it's impressive, and it's kind of a sidebar. So there's an individual in the rental business. I'm not going to out him because then everybody's going to call and try to get introductions. But he was high school friends with Billy Beane, and we worked together. And he knew what a big Oakland A's fan I was. And so I'm going back. This is a decade ago. And this was post Moneyball. I want to say I don't think the movie had come out yet, but the book was a big hit. The movie was coming out, and he goes, "Hey, Billy's in town. Do you want to go to dinner?" And I thought, this is a joke, right? There's no way. And sure enough, we go to the hotel and we pick up Billy Beane and we take him to dinner and we talked. And he made a joke like, "Please don't be a fangirl. Like, don't embarrass me while we're at this dinner. Don't ask a bunch of questions." And I got to have dinner with Billy Beane, and just a normal guy. He talked about all the interns they bring in and the practical jokes and how they looked at the sport. And just it was a total normal conversation, but it took everything in me not to start asking questions about the team and why do you do this? But it just was a great experience and one that I'll never forget. And, wow. As a fan, it was, what a great experience to do that. And I'm lucky that my buddy was able to set that up.
Yeah, I'm jealous. I'm a technology data person and a huge sports fan. And he's like the intersection of that, right? He's like an idol. What biggest takeaway of meeting him? What did you learn from that conversation?
Just what a humble, normal guy he is, right? And you think about it, he's not. I mean, he was, in the conversation, he talked a little bit about the movie, and obviously he had to spend time with Brad Pitt, and at the time Angelina Jolie, and Michael Lewis, who wrote the book, and all the circle in which he operates in. And here we were, just three rental guys, right? Not even in the same stratosphere as him. And you could have left that dinner thinking that the four of us were collectively good friends, and just didn't take himself too serious. Was just an extremely humble, normal person. That was probably the biggest takeaway, is this guy is in a different world and he's treating us like we're his peers. So that was probably the biggest takeaway.
That's awesome. You don't always hear about people get that success. They change. And it sounds like he's stayed to his roots, even going to the point like, hey, don't make this a big deal. Don't out me. I don't want to be special. That's awesome. Makes me more of a fan now. Well, we won't talk about Billy Beane the whole conversation here. We're going to say one more thing.
No, it's a self-deprecating humor too. He was everything when we bring stuff up about, oh, you hung out with Brad Pitt. He'd make a joke, right, to make it, kind of level the playing field and not make it. So it was really a really cool experience, and he did a good job, talking about the interns and the practical jokes they play, and how he hires interns with no sports, affiliation. In fact, that's one of the questions, right? Have you ever played Little League? No, perfect, right? You're going to be the perfect intern for us.
Interesting. And why is that? Just because you don't want to be like, I guess, is it all analytics and rigor and you don't want to be biased? Is that sort of his view?
Yeah, it was all the interns he had were economics, business degrees. So it was really more of, hey, they're going to be looking at analytics and looking at data, and it's to them it should be numbers on a spreadsheet, not necessarily individual players or performance. Or like I would have a heck of a time doing that, right? Because I'd have a bias to an individual that I like,
Yeah,
and
right.
I couldn't the numbers. I get what the numbers say, but let me tell you why. Jason Giambi is a great player, and you get
Yeah.
away from that.
Interesting. I like that perspective. I think that truly being objective with the data and the metrics, and they won because of it, right? So
Yeah.
the little insight there. Well, we're gonna talk about your story today. Although the Billy Bean story I was not expecting is very cool. So Ben, tell us about your background, how you got here today. Started as a yard guy, right? Now you're the EVP at Genie. So a lot of things in between. How long have you been in rental or equipment? How did you first get started?
Yeah, so the story kind of even predates when I got in the business. I started in the business in '02, but it predates. So my grandfather, excuse me, moved from Boise to Southern California in 1952 and worked for a company called Shepherd Machinery, which is now part of the Quinn Group, the cat dealer network. And he worked there from
Hmm.
1952 to 1994 in a wide variety of jobs. But the majority of his career was as the used equipment sales manager. And then fast forward, my father, after the Army, went to work for that cat dealer, worked for Shepherd Machinery, was a branch manager. My uncle worked for that cat dealership as well when he was going to college. Met my aunt, who was actually working at that cat dealership while she was going to college. In fact, my grandpa introduced my aunt and uncle together while she was working there. She'd met my grandpa before she'd met my uncle, and so that's how my family got started. We ended up moving to Northern California. My dad worked for a company called Morgan Machinery, which had ties to Brambles and some other organizations. And then in '97, my dad went to go work for Genie Industries. He worked at Genie from 1997 to that, retired in 2019. Spent the majority of his time at Genie in a wide variety of roles, but the majority of it was the regional vice president of the West Coast. I third generation grew up in the business. I remember going to Shepherd Machinery and visiting my grandpa at the dealership. My dad worked for a company across the street called Adco Equipment, which was a Indian Skyjack dealer and had a rental division and also had an entertainment group with the Black Stick Booms and worked in the entertainment group. So I spent my whole life in rental yards, filing contracts, landscaper, never thought of it as a real job. So fast forward, I'm working in kind of the action sports retail business, renting snowboards, waxing snowboards, snowboard instructor, and got to the point where I needed health insurance. And so that's I remember going to my dad one day saying, I got to get health insurance. I think I paid for a dentist appointment and it was just, it was a
Yeah,
lot of money. I
your
got to find
first
a
take
job.
of
Yeah.
adulthood. You're like, this is not. I need some insurance.
Yeah. So he said, drive down to the local rental yard and apply for a yard guy job. Had no idea what a yard guy did. And so I drove down to the local rental yard which was United Rentals in Escondido, interviewed with an individual and had a really good interview. And I mean, literally went and took the pre-employment drug screening, and 2 days later I got a phone call back saying I passed and when can I start. And that was it. And full transparency, I planned on doing that job kind of while I figured out what I wanted to do while I was in school, be a yard guy, washing equipment, helping will call customers. Fast forward 23 years later, I can't imagine doing anything else. I just fell in love with the
Mm.
industry. I liked the fact that every day was different. You're dealing with blue collar customers. You're dealing with white collar customers. You're solving problems. Customers are calling you with, I got something I need to solve right now. What can you do? And you get to be the one to solve it. And it just became a true passion. And that's how I kind of fell into it and was a, equipment associate at United for quite some time. Then I moved into inside sales, dispatching trucks, handling will call customers, writing contracts, working with the sales team, predating, CRMs and sales reps
Yeah.
being able to do that stuff, having to actually call the branch. And it was great. I just fell in love with the people. And fast forward to spent time as an outside sales rep, did a little bit of everything from managing a territory to just wholesaling equipment and then, handling just a book of business. And I worked for a boss at United who's still a really good friend of mine. In fact, he's going to have his 44th anniversary at US United Rentals here in a couple of days. I was complaining to him one day. I call it complaining. He says I was just, venting, but why do we do this? Why do we do that?
Yeah.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we do that? He said, if you think being a manager is so easy, why don't you go be a branch manager? And that was,
Mm.
I never envisioned myself, leading people. I like being a self-starter and kind of managing my territory, managing my customers and really being accountable to myself. And then once I went into branch management, that was it. I really enjoyed that aspect of the business of it's sales in a different aspect, right? You're leading a team of people, you're helping them understand the why, you're getting them to buy into the culture and where you want to go. And then ultimately you're the sounding board. You listen to the ideas and suggestions of how they can make any organization better, and you go work with the team to implement it. And so that's how I got started, in the business. And my wife and I laugh, right? If I won the lottery tomorrow and became the mega bucks millionaire in California, I'd still get up to go to work on Monday and do this job because I just really enjoy the business. I enjoy all those facets that we talked about. And I might have a different car and I might fly, fly private opposed to commercial if I won the
Yeah.
lottery. But I'd still go to work and do the job because I just really enjoy this industry.
Yeah, and so you've worked at some of the nationals, right? You worked at H&E, United, Sunbelt in different roles, sales management roles, district manager operations roles, and then you left for Genie about a year ago, right? What
Correct.
made that shift from the national rental company to the OEM? What led to that transition?
Yeah, I've always enjoyed the rental piece of it. Obviously, having direct connection with my dad being a Genie, and my uncle actually worked at Genie as well. He was here for a decade. In the rental business, you have a lot of products, and you have to, right? You could have a lot of different OEMs. If you look at just earth moving, you could have John Deere and Case, and you could have Komatsu or Hyundai, or you go down the list. So you get to learn a lot about a product. But I always felt like, for me, I'm not speaking for anybody else, but for myself, I felt like I didn't really get to be a true product expert because you don't get to own just that product and talk about it specifically from a
Mm,
features and benefits perspective. So there was always a piece of me that, man, I really would love to have just a product and own that product and own that segment and really become a true expert. Like with my grandfather, right? He forgot more about Caterpillar than I'll probably ever know just because of his time period there and all the things he got to do and the product development he got to be a part of, because that's all he ever had. It was just Caterpillar. And I in a rental yard, I always had so many different products. It was really hard to be a true product expert. And so there was
mm,
always the allure of, and what would it be like to have a product and a so-called expert. And so the opportunity came up with Genie, and obviously family lineage, right? My father being there at one point and my uncle being there. And I felt like, since 1997, I've been around the Genie team and the Genie culture
yeah.
from the original three owners to when Terex bought it. It just was the right time and right place and right opportunity. And I jumped at it, and it's been a great marriage for myself and for the customers. And I feel like I can serve our customers, better in the sense that I spent 22 plus years in the rental yard and every different
Mm,
facet other than mechanic, right? I'm not mechanical. I'm the first one to raise my hand and say, don't call me to change a tire or to change an oil on a car or,
yeah.
or service a piece of equipment. It's probably not going to be in the same shape it was once in. But if it's anything else in the rental business, I feel like I can help and at least engage in the conversation.
Yeah, I imagine your experience as a operating in a rental company, purchasing Genie equipment has been hugely valuable to what you're doing because you can relate to what people on the other side are doing, right? I imagine that's probably like a pretty useful insight that your new customers probably appreciate. You're not just saying the things, you've experienced it, you've lived it, you've been on the other side of the table.
Yeah, I always try to put myself in the shoes of when I'm talking to our customers, right? As a customer, what would I think? What would I do? Or
Yeah,
how
right.
would I feel about this change or what we're trying to do? So I always try to make sure that I'm not far from that and lose that perspective of I have been a customer. I know what it's like to call the 1-800 number. I know what it's like to send an email to my sales rep. I know what it's like to have an immediate need on a job site and what I'm expecting from my OEM or from my vendor. So I try not to lose that aspect because that is important. That is a big piece of what we do. And we ultimately serve the customer, and we're looking for partnership with our customers, long-term partnerships. We're not looking for a quick deal and just let's sell one piece of equipment. We want to do it in perpetuity for that business as long as they're in business. And so that's what I wanted, right? I wanted the same thing with my OEM. As I don't want to talk about this deal. I want to talk about future deals. And
Mm.
if you're not going to do that for me, then I don't know that I have the time or place for that because I've got to do stuff for my team that's going to be long term, not short term.
Mm. Well, I mean, obviously, there's a lot of OEMs. You chose Genie for several reasons. One of them is the partnership angle they have, right? Where they not just trying to make this one transaction, but a longer view. How does Genie do that? How do you build that longer partnership?
Yeah,
Is it building trust? How do you do that?
yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head. I think trust is a big piece of that, right? And I think trust comes over time. I'm a big believer that you don't build a relationship on one sales call. And I
Mm.
think it's really easy in our business to think that. Like, I called on Kyle and Kyle didn't call me back right away. And I called on
Yeah.
Kyle twice and I don't know why he's not giving me business. And I always try to liken it to if you're married, most people, I shouldn't say all of them, but most people don't meet somebody and go, hey, Kyle, let's get married, right? Day one, first time we've met, we're in this forever. We're in it for the long haul. That's not reality, right? It takes a long courting period, and we figure out that we've got the same interests and the same likes, and same culture, and we've got the same beliefs, and then we eventually decide that we're going to be in this long-term partnership. And I view it the same way. In order to build trust, we've got to show up day in and day out. It can't be one sales call. It can't be fixing one issue. It's got to be committing to showing up and being involved, and then having those open and honest conversations. I'm a big believer that a partnership, there's going to be times when the customer is going to ask us for something, and we're going to have to take a hard look at it. And maybe it might be something we don't want to do, but we do it because it's the right thing for the customer at the right time where they're at. But on the flip side, we should be able to go back to that customer and maybe have the same conversation. Hey, we really need you to do X, or we really need this because of this. And we have that transparent and open conversation. That to me is what builds those long lasting partnerships, where we feel like we can have that open dialogue, where it's not OEM to customer and it's got to be combative and it's got to always be a negotiation, and so-and-so wins or the vendor wins or whatnot. We all win. The customer grows and we're in a good partnership, then we grow with them. If the customer's in a tough spot, then we need to be in a tough spot with them while they're going through that, and figure out collective ways that they can win, and be an ally, someone they can bounce stuff off of, right? Let's not always just talk about what's in it for us, what's in it for the customer. Hey, what can we do to help you? And I'm a big proponent of that, right? I have plenty of calls throughout the day that really have nothing to do with me selling Genie product. It's someone calling saying, hey, can I bounce an idea off you? Or, hey, what do you think of this? And those to me are the most fruitful conversations, because that's a level of trust, and we're now viewed as a business partner, not necessarily just the OEM.
Well, that is what this conversation is. Unfortunately for you, I'm not buying any Genie product today.
Yeah.
But that's the whole thing, right? You're building trust, you're the partnership. Although I may not buy equipment from Genie, our audience is listening and they might not buy something today, but they're like, I know that Ben guy and he gave me some good insights. And that sort of attitude, that mindset of, hey, I'm going to be successful for the next 10 years. And to do that, we're going to take a longer view about, Elliot Vigil will talk about serve before you sell, right? Like continuing to add value. There will be a time to sell and to close, of course, right? We're all got to operate a business here, but you don't call them and say, hey, let me get married today, right? This is not Love is Blind, though that show is fun to watch, where the Netflix shows are, right? My wife watches them. But like, this is like a longer partnership. And I think your perspective is right. It's not just one call close. Like, that's not the right way to do it. That's actually probably not going to go great in the same way as if you had a one date marriage. Probably not going to work out super well, right? It's that building partnership over a period of time.
And it's tough in the rental business, right? I go back to my time in the rental business. It's easy to get seduced by that, because there are times you walk on a job site and you truly are right place, the right time, and someone goes, "Oh my gosh, Kyle, I'm so glad you're here. I need a 60-foot boom lift tomorrow for my lath and plaster guy." And you're like, this was easy. I just walked in the trailer and the guy gave me an order. The young lady gave me an order. Yeah. This is great. And it's easy to get seduced to think that every transaction is that, but that's just not reality, right? Those are just very few and far between, and you get lucky. And I'm guilty of it too. I've had plenty of deals where you get an order right off the bat, or you just strike at the right time, and then you assume every relationship's like that and every deal should be like that. And that's just not the case. And that's why you see so many times where rental salespeople early in their career, call on somebody 4 or 5 times and get discouraged because they're not getting business, so they just stop calling that person. And in the rental business, I'm a big believer that it's, who calls on that customer and who's present, who shows up, will eventually over time be the one that gets the order, right? Because it is about being the right place at the right time. When that person thinks about equipment rental, it's the first name that pops in their head, because that person's been present and showing up day in and day out. And there's a customer that I called on, and he was famous for, he'd bring out his 3-ring binder and open it up and go and show you all the different rental people that called on him. And there'd be times when there'd be pages of the same rental company, of different people. And he was famous for, you're calling on me today. This is your first time calling on me, Kyle. Show up a year if you continue to show up 1 year from today, I'll give you an order. And he would do that all the time. And he would tell me the success rate of giving orders was few and far between. It was like 10%, because people stop calling because they get frustrated. Like, I've called on this guy so many times, he never gives me an order. Until I know you're going to be committed, I'm not going to give you an order. And that was his way of kind of flushing out sales reps. And so you got to just show up day in and day out, as much as it's a grind, and ask the right questions. The days of, hey, Kyle, I was just in the area, wanted to stop by and see you. That's not value to the customer. They've got so many different things going on. If that's your elevator pitch, you've already wasted the customer's, or the prospect's time, because you're never in the area and you're never just stopping by. There's got to be a reason why you're making that sales call. There's a reason why you're walking into that customer's office. There's a reason you open the truck door. Tell the customer what it is and ask the right questions.
Yeah, well, that's funny you talked about that. I do want to get into some of the lessons you've learned from selling, working at the Nationals. So the episode before this, Dan Maitland just came on. He's a contractor. He rents from rental companies, and he said the same thing. He's like, "Do not come by my office with a box of donuts. Like, just say I'm in the area. Like that is like work. Don't do 500 calls a day. That doesn't work anymore. It's got to be intentional, right? And you have to have a purpose and a reason to introduce yourself. What would be some of those things? What are some of those lessons you learned from selling?" Working at the Nationals, that independent rental companies listening to this can take to heart, or independent sales reps working at rental companies? What can they learn from your experience to make them more successful?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've ran the full gamut of kind of the highs and lows. When I went from inside sales to outside sales, I felt like I had a perspective of what outside sales reps do. I soon found out I had no clue what they do. I tell the story, kind of a sidebar. I've been an outside sales rep for about 4 weeks. So calling on job sites, getting my boots dirty, doing everything I could. And I called on a job site. I'll never forget it. I can tell you that 20 something years later, I can still picture the job site. It was the Nordstrom's getting built in Fashion Island Fashion Island in Newport Beach. And I walked into a job trailer that I'd been in several times. And the guy finally goes, "Do you want a sub list?" I said, "Sure." I had no idea what that was, but I just said, "Sure. Yeah, I'd love a sub list." He hands it to me, and I talked to him for a bit. I walked in the truck and I'm looking at that sub list, and it shows landscape, and it says the company name and the contact. It says steel erector, company name, contact. It says, concrete. And I literally was like, oh my gosh, this is how I've been calling on job sites for a month, just the job trailer. Had no clue. I thought the job trailer is where everything happened. Everybody makes the decision there. So being a young, fresh, excited sales rep, I remember going to that sales meeting and telling the senior sales reps that have been doing this a long time, hey, if you guys walk in a job trailer and ask for a sub list, you can figure out everybody that's renting the job site. And they looked at me like, what have you been doing for the last month on this job? How have you not been doing that? I had no clue. No one, I didn't ask. No one had showed me. I just didn't know. And so lesson learned, right? Like, hey, you don't get what you don't ask for. So ask, uncover those things. Ask how the projects ran. I thought I knew construction. What I found out when I became a sales rep was I didn't even really understand the phases of construction. I was asking questions about who's the landscaper when they were still grading concrete or still grading the pad. Who cares who the landscaper is, right? I mean, we're a year away from that. And so that was a big lesson learned, was learning the phases of construction, when to ask the right questions. You mentioned the contractor talking about donuts. Early when I became a sales rep, I had somebody mentoring me and they were a big donut guy. You got to do donuts. You got to do donuts. And so I did that for a bit. And what I realized was, you kind of get blinded by, I made 15 sales calls and it's 8 a.m. I didn't really make 15 sales. I made 15 stops and dropped off donuts that have no value. And yeah, it's got a business card glued in there, but I'm not having any fruitful conversations because it's, hey, here's your donuts. I got to get to the next one because who's dropping donuts off at 11 a.m., right? Nobody. I got to get rid of these things. And so I did that for a bit. Years later as a sales manager, I was very explicit. Do not expense donuts because I'm going to deny the expense. We're not in the area. We're not dropping by. We're not here to drop off donuts. If it's an important meeting, a safety meeting, a sub meeting, let's do it. But we're here to uncover information and be of value to the customer. And so I think that's the piece of it. I learned later on, I made every mistake along the way, right? I mean, from not having a plan to just showing up in an office, not having a plan for my day, not having a plan for the week, walking out Monday morning, hopping in the truck and say, I think I'm going to call in this area, right? Which is a huge mistake. You need to really figure out what your true revenue goal is for the year and then back yourself into it. And that revenue goal, in my opinion, as a sales rep, should be tied to what you want to make. Those two should correlate. And I've had those conversations with reps early in their career of what's your compensation, what do you want to make? And they throw out a number and it could be $1 million. That's great. How much revenue do you need to have to make $1 million? Not a clue. Well, you need to figure that out first. Let's help you figure out what that is. If you really truly want to make $1 million a year, you'd have to have X a million on rent. So today you're at 0. So how do we get you there? And if the end of the year is your goal, you're probably not going to get there by the end of that first year. But let's figure out what that is. And so I'm a big proponent of, you need to figure out where you want to be at the end of the year as a rental sales rep, and then back into that by month, by quarter, and then essentially by day. Because it's all those little things that add up, right? What you do today is going to have success 3 months from now. So you got to do it day in and day out, and then keep yourself accountable. If you need to make 15 face-to-face calls and book 10 rentals a day every day, and today you only got 8, that's okay. So then tomorrow you got to get 12, right? And then maybe tomorrow you only get 11. So then you just, it's that day, and it's that keeping yourself accountable to those things. I think will keep you successful long term. But then also making sure that you follow up and you show up, because that's easy for a sales rep as you have success, right? Like, oh, I meant to call on Kyle, on Monday, and then all of a sudden it's next Monday, and then it's next Monday, and it's next Monday. And by the time I call on you, it's been 6 months, and you've already built a relationship with somebody else. And now I've got to try to break down that, try to get myself inserted as call number 2 or 3 when I could have had you at call number 1. I didn't have a great plan, and I got too busy to hold myself accountable to build that relationship with you. And at the end of the day, it's our goal as a rental salesperson to be a value to the customer. And, oh yeah, Kyle hasn't called me. He doesn't have any rental needs. Kyle's got rental needs. He's just not calling you because you're not at front of mind. So it's our job to be front of mind and make sure that when he does have a rental need, we're there and he knows that we can solve that solution.
So how do you stay top of mind if the donuts is not the thing? Which I'm glad you said that. I also can imagine you just rejecting the receipts. Like, stop sending the donuts in. At some point, I'm going to fire you for doing this. Obviously, like, so people still do that. It doesn't necessarily work. I don't think it works. You have to stay top of mind, but in a way that has a reason. There's a reason to stay top of mind. There's value that needs to be added. How do great sales reps do that? Stay top of mind without being annoying and dropping donuts off. What are some of the things they do?
Yeah, I think for a rental sales rep, I think the biggest thing, you got to really know your market, and you got to know your industry. When I was a sales manager, that was always my biggest thing. And nobody should know your business better than you, Mr. and Mr. Sales Rep, right? You shouldn't call me and ask me what you think the rate should be. You should be calling me, telling me what you need to be from a rate perspective, because, and then list all the things why. This is what's going on in my market. Here's the job site. Here's the competitive analysis. You need to truly be the industry expert on the rental business perspective, but then you also need to also have insights to that customer's business, know their business. I've been on several sales calls where we're calling on a customer, insert, industry, and we know nothing about that industry. So how can we be of value to that customer? We don't even really know what they do or what they use it
Yeah.
for. And that's always a question. Even when I was riding with sales reps, I got an order from this customer for a 10K telehandler. Oh, what do they do with it? Oh, they're moving materials. Well, what kind of materials are they moving around? Well, they do solar, so I'm sure it's solar panels. Are we sure? Because we should be really certain what they're doing. Let's go dig a little bit deeper and really know what they're doing with that machine or whatever it is. And I worked with an individual. He's since passed. He was the best at it. I mean, I was impressed. I mean, you could go to a job site. He wouldn't have to talk to his customer. He could pull up to the job site of his customer and tell you exactly what was going on that job site, how they were pouring concrete, why they were doing it that way, what it does for them, when they're doing it. And then we go in and talk to the customer, and the customer, what it was. Now, again, he built that up over time, but he became a true business partner. Or it was, he knows what we need. He knows why we need it. He embedded themselves and asked a lot of questions, and was just kind of a sponge. Hey, teach me your business. Help me understand your business. I know the equipment business. I know the features and benefits. Let me parlay that into what you guys are doing. And he was a wizard at that, and it was impressive. I mean, it's probably one of the most impressive things I've ever seen when you walk on the job site and see them. And there's still people in this industry that do that. And I think that's where you take yourself from a rental, just, hey, this is my rental guy or girl, to this is my rental business partner, because they know why I need it. They know the importance of downtime. They know the difference, the importance between cost and price. And those companies will continue to go to that person, he or she, because of that value. So I think the way you do it is you really have to embed yourself and learn that customer's business and how they do things. And I think the best way to do it is ask yourself why. Okay, why do they do this? If you can't answer that why, then go ask the question. And then, well, why do they do it like that? Well, okay, then ask yourself, then ask the next question. Really get to that scenario of, hey, I can explain this to anybody that's asking the question about my certain customer. And then the goal would be eventually to be able to do it about all your customers, or maybe that whole segment. If you've got heavy oil and gas, you should be the oil and gas expert and understand how they do things a certain way and why. If you got agriculture, they pick strawberries this way, and here's how they do it. And here's how it goes into the cold storage facility, and here's why they do it.
A previous episode, guest talked about setting up quarterly business reviews, like coming in with a purpose, like, hey, here's your rental history, here are your trends. Here, actually, you've rented this piece of machine over 325 hours. You should just go ahead and buy it. Obviously, we're making money on this, where it's counterproductive, but like, you should just go ahead and buy this piece of equipment. But you're coming in with value in a way that you're building trust. And it's like, okay, I'm looking forward to this quarterly meeting because you're going to tell me how to make my business smarter and better, versus the donuts, which is sort of lazy, right?
Yeah.
The other thing I think that's maybe happening is, it seems to me that I guess it's becoming more important to really understand the specs of the equipment, which is maybe how it used to be done. That's maybe becoming more important now. Can you tell me about that? Like actually really understand the products that are being rented on job sites?
Yeah, I think when I first started, right? I know I sound like the old guy in the room. Like when I first started in the business, we did everything with with rocks. But it used to be. I mean, the customers would call in and truly ask you those specs. Hey, how many cubic yards is a skip loader? And you'd
Yeah.
have to really know off the top of your head, or you'd have to
Yeah.
grab the old catalog and thumb through the catalog and get the answer. I remember my old catalog that I'd had as my master had sticky notes and post-it notes and marker written all over it because I would wanted to make sure the next time someone called, I didn't have to spend that time thumbing through. I wanted to be top of mind and say, oh, it's 0.75 cubic yards, or this is the spec of this machine, or hey, I've got this backhoe and I don't know what the controls are. Oh, the lever's here, and being able to walk them through it visually. That was a really big piece of it. And that was, yeah, there was the internet, but customers weren't as savvy. They weren't sitting in front of a computer like they are today on a job site
Mhm.
and being able to Google something and pull it up, or, whatever search engine they use, and be able to get the specs themselves. It was really truly the first instinct was to pick up the phone and call somebody, and you better know or be able to have access to that information. As the internet really blew up and people got in front of their computers a lot more, that kind of went away, and customers got a lot more savvy, and meaning contractors got a lot more savvy of knowing exactly what they wanted and when they wanted it and why. And I felt like as an industry, we kind of got away from that of, hey, we're just providing a solution, right? Customer needs to dig a hole to put, utilities into the ground. Doesn't matter how he does it or what the application is, as long as that machine can dig a hole. I think we're starting to see that kind of trend come back where customers, hey, I think it's this piece of equipment. Hey, Mr. or Mrs. Sales Rep, is it the right piece of equipment? And that's where that features and benefits come in. And I think it's really important that those are the two areas that a rental sales rep starting today needs to know is the phases of construction, who are the contractors on site and what they do, and then ultimately what are the pieces of equipment they rent. And as equipment gets more sophisticated and updates, because every OEM updates their equipment and it's new technologies and new things, how do they get themselves staying close to that stuff to learn it? So it's really important, I would think, as a rental sales rep starting today, I need to have, whether it's in my phone or the old school, three-ring binder with business cards, I need to have every OEM that we do business with at the dial that I can call and have a real quick conversation. So even if I don't have the answer on a feature or benefit, I can call that individual and say, hey, I just walked out of so-and-so's office. They asked me this. What's the right answer? It's this, this, and this. Okay, where do I go to find that information? Because at the end of the day, the business transacts so fast in the rental world, you got to be able to get back to that customer. Because in today's tech, I mean, you might walk out and say, I'll get you that answer. And before you even get in the truck, they've already picked up the phone and called rental company number 2 or rental company number 3 or somebody else that they've dealt with. And they're getting
Yeah.
that answer.
Well, speed's super important, and I think even how can sales reps use technology, right? So, like obviously Google, et cetera, but obviously AI tools like ChatGPT. I was at a hotel last week. Air conditioning wasn't working. Took a picture of it on ChatGPT. How do I turn the AC on? It was like, oh, this model number 123. If you click this button, and like, I imagine there's quick use cases like that. Take a picture of the piece of equipment using the ChatGPT app. It'll tell you the specs, and maybe it's not perfect because it's not perfect AI stuff yet, but it'll get you pretty close, pretty fast. Things like that to be more creative to, especially if you're new to the industry, you don't know all the specs, right? You can now use technology to get you there much faster, right? Without having to go through the thick binder of
Yeah.
sticky notes, everything else that you used to do back in the day.
Yeah, no, I think, and you bring up a great point. I mean, having that stuff where it's at the ready, whether it's on your phone or your
Yeah.
tablet or it's on your computer where you've got access to that information, right? It used to be the rental catalog. To your point, you'd have the big, thick rental catalog with all the sticky notes. Today, maybe it's those features and saving that stuff to bookmark it so you can pull it and have it readily available. I know at one point in time, you compete with another rental company and they have product X needed product Y, right? And so taking the time to actually build out, okay, so how do I sell against that product? Like what is the differentiating factor, and having that readily available, or customers call and give you that model number. I need this, I need a 307. And you're like, what the heck's a 307? I don't even know what that is in my rental world, and having to figure
Yeah.
that out, right? But being able to know, okay, they're referencing that model. That's this model over here, and I know what they're asking for. I think those are important things to spend the time to do that stuff, because it does make you more valuable, because speed is a big piece of it, and being able to work through that. And then also having the confidence when a customer might ask you for a
Mm.
specific make and model, what is it about that make and model that you like? Helping understand what that is, because sometimes it's just what they've always rented. They don't know any better. They're not close to the vendor, close to the OEM. So sometimes it might be, well, help me understand why you like this specific make and model, because I have this specific make and model, and let me tell you about it. It's a great features and benefits or a selling conversation for a rental rep, rather than just say, oh, the customer wanted model X because that's what they requested. Well, it might not even be the right piece of equipment.
But you got to know your stuff, right? And I think that's something that's becoming more and more important as a sales rep. I want to talk to about a little bit some of what's going on in the industry. Some people talk about consolidation. It's happening to some level, of course. You've worked at the Nationals for a long time. I think as an independent as well. You're now at the OEM side. Most of our audience are independent rental companies listening to this. What are some things that independents can do to be successful to make sure they can sort of fight back against consolidation to build a strong business? What makes independents successful in your mind?
Yeah, I think, I think what makes it, well, I worked for an independent, right? We worked for an individual. It was a 2-store, actually, I guess technically a 3-location company. And it was, we were competing in a space that was, a lot of bigger companies with a lot bigger fleets. And I think, the sales pitch amongst that team is being that local provider. I think there's a niche for every customer base, right? I mean, it's easy when you could give any market, right? Mega projects is a big buzzword, right? Everybody wants to talk about these mega projects, whether we're talking about data centers or solar projects or lithium battery facilities, or manufacturing facilities. Are huge. They take a lot of fleet up. They're great projects. Don't get me wrong. But when I worked for an independent, those were projects that we couldn't touch. Now they weren't to the size and scope they are today, but we couldn't touch those. I mean, I had to almost drive by those projects as much as you see the tower cranes and you want to stop in because this project could take 219-foot scissor lifts. We didn't have 219-foot scissor lifts, so it really, to me, it was one of those things. I need to find markets in which I can compete with customers and be truly value add, that I've got the fleet for them. So I think that was an interesting piece of how do we find those markets that we can compete in for the right customer base and the customers that we want to deal with, because they might not be being called on by some bigger companies, and that was great for us. Another piece of it is that when they do call us, we've got to be responsive, right? We've almost got to be, our passion for customer service has to outweigh everybody else, and I think it resonates across anything. Is when those companies called, there were times when I think when I worked for that independent company, 1 out of every 5 rentals we actually had in stock. We actually physically had that equipment. And so our owner gave us kind of the levity of, hey, you can go re-rent. We're open to re-rents. If you can find it, take care of the customer. And so that was the thing was, I was always honest about it. I wanted to tell them, my kind of thing was, hey, if you call me, I don't have it, I'll find it for you. And I'm going to give you the option. You can rent it for me. I'll rent it and then rent it back to you, or I'll give you the company name and phone number and they'll call you and you can take the deal. In a lot of cases, the customers were like, hey, you did the groundwork, just rent it for me. And I think that was a big piece of, we were so focused on, we're going to take care of the customer no matter what. Even if we don't get the deal, the customer is going to know that we went above and beyond. Where I think in some cases, their experience, in a lot of cases where they'd call another company and they'd say, hey, do you have X, Y, and Z? And they go, nope, we're out of it. Click. Okay. Where with us, it was, hey, we're going to do everything we can. We're going to find you that solution because we are just so passionate about taking care of you as a customer. I think that's what set us apart. And we had success. I mean, to the point we were acquired by a bigger company, and we gravitated towards that company. But at that time period, it was a lot of fun competing in that space. Not having the fleet, not having the resources, and trying to figure out solutions to take care of our customers. But it really came down to everybody within the organization, from sales rep to inside sales rep to store manager to owner, did everything they could to take care of that customer. There was nobody above figuring out how to take care of a deal. And I think that's where you have success. I mean, there were times we'd be at the office late at night where the dispatchers were helping load trucks because we had to get a deal out for a big customer, or mechanics were inside, making phone calls to other rental companies trying to find the piece of equipment. Like, everybody was customer centric, and I think that's what set us apart, and what I think sets some of these independent companies apart. Of, at the end of the day, everybody is taking care of that customer.
You almost have to, right? Because the Nationals have the advantage of scale and more resources. This is every industry. So how do you win? Find your niche, like you said, but serve the customer extremely well, because smaller guys can move fast. That's the one advantage they have. They can be more nimble, they can move quickly. It reminds me of the car commercial when I grew up. There was this car commercial. The guy was like, "We say yes to every deal." Well, the subtext was the deal had to make sense for the dealership, right? Yeah. But the whole perspective was like, we're going to say yes, we're going to make this work. And I think that's how the independents can win. Another topic that's sort of happening, right? This AI boom. There's not enough data centers. They just can't build fast enough. Yeah. Do you see the Nationals getting pulled into that and potentially creating a vacuum for some of the smaller projects that they maybe were serving more of? I'm just curious how you see that playing out over the next few years.
Yeah, it's interesting. In the Nationals, the large scope of their business, right? And it's public knowledge. I mean, as majority of their revenue, I shouldn't say majority, but a large portion, 40+%, comes from what they consider national and or strategic accounts or select accounts, whatever they call them, right? And And then it needs to, because they're a national based company, and each one of them has, the consolidators each have, all the specialty products that go with it, right? Whether we're talking power HVAC, pumps, matting systems, entertainment. They've got all these different things that serve all those national customers. So their challenge is how do you serve all three customer bases? Because there's that national customer base on those big projects like you mentioned. And then there's kind of that mid-level, maybe regional customer base, and then you've got that local customer base. And it is really tough to serve all three of those extremely well. Somebody is going to have to face, right, whether it's supply constraints or service constraints or just resource constraints. There's somebody is going to miss out on that. And I think on the inverse, right, on the independent side, you've got that local customer base, maybe some regional customers, and then maybe some mega projects that land. And they have to prioritize which one they want to serve. And sometimes you get lucky and you land a big project and it's great. It's just a matter of which one do you really want to serve. And if I was starting a rental company today, I want to be really good at that local independent company that's not going anyplace. They might be like, I live in Murrieta, California. I want every electrical contractor in Murrieta, California to know who I am. I would want them to know my rental company by name, and we would serve them and be available for them because we're here locally. You're here locally. Let's work together, and then grow my business out from there. But that local stuff, I really want to be really good at it. And I do think, it's that you got to figure out what's the best return for your resources and what are you chasing. And it's easy, right? It's easy to get blinded by big tower cranes and big projects. They're great when you have them. And I've been on them and I've served them, and they're a lot of fun. It's really great to plant your flag and say, look at this project we're on. But it takes a lot of resources and a lot of time. And everybody's lying if they don't say that when they're landing a big project, they're not losing revenue somewhere else. They are. It's just, you just don't notice it. You don't see it.
Yeah, that's interesting. We've other guests talked about the niches to riches strategy, find your niche, right? And I think we have to be honest as an independent company. Are you really going to be able to outcompete United and Sunbelt, all these national projects? And maybe, right? But like, what's that going to actually take to win that consistently and not just a one-off? I think your point being is well said, right? But like, if you were starting today, you would find and dominate a very specific niche in a very local market, and you can do incredibly well because you will beat the nationals. They can't touch that. For them to touch that, they'd have to give it the big national projects. They're never going to do that, right? So I think that's the key for independence is finding that local niche, dominating that market. Got one location, then maybe add a second location and dominate that market, right? But don't try to be all things to all people at the same time.
And every territory is different, right? You've got some markets that have a lot of open space, and they're going to be, to your point, they're going to be some construction of maybe schools and residential and what does that look like? And that's one niche. And you might have another market that, I'm opening up a company. I've got a lot of industrial space. There's a lot of tilt up, industrial manufacturing facilities. There's probably rental equipment within inside those manufacturing facilities, right? Whether, inventory or whatever they're doing. So how do you build a model that you go in and call on those customers? And maybe there's a place where you team up with somebody. Forklift companies do a phenomenal job owning those spaces. You don't ever see them. They do these leases or RPOs. There could be 30 forklifts in an industrial space. Well, those customers still probably need scissor lifts and electric boom lifts or whatever it is, and they don't know who to call. And there's an opportunity to team up and work together. And I knew a company. They're no longer business. They sold, but one of their claims to fame were the two owners teamed up with Gray Bar Electric. Gray Bar Electric sells electrical supplies and stuff to these projects. They're not a rental company. But you think about every project that's going to get going, those electricians are calling, getting bids on all the materials they need before that project starts, then eventually ordering those products. So they became really tied in with Gray Bar where, hey, you know about a project before we know about a project, even though our customers might be getting it. So how about we work together? We'll feed our customers to you, right, to buy supplies. You feed your supply customers to us on the rental piece. And it was as soon as they said it, you're like, it's genius. They're not competing interests, but now they're almost vendors working together because they are calling on the same customers in the same market at the same time. So they told me one time they did a big camping trip with all their biggest customers, and Gray Bar Electric and this rental company sponsored it. It's like, it's genius. That's great. I'd never even thought of doing that. I wish I would have thought of it 20 years ago when I was starting out in the field, because they're not a competitor, but they're doing the same job in a different space.
The camping trip sounds fun. I would be game for that, right?
Yeah.
Well, Ben, we're just out of time here. It's been great having you on here today. Talked about a lot of different things. Talked about what makes an independent special. How did they win? Talked about your experience selling for the Nationals, everything you've learned there. Don't bring a box of donuts, effectively, in your background story, right? Yeah. Third generation, 23 years, yard guy to EVP at Genie. Last question I'd like to kind of close with, I ask every guest is best career advice you've gotten or anything that's helped shaped your success and what you've been doing?
Yeah. So the best career advice I've gotten and I can give is, it's really easy, especially, and I started in this business at 19 as a yard guy. I was 19 years old and had, once I realized this was going to be my career, it's really easy to get blinded with career aspirations of I want to do this job. And then when I get to that job, do this job. And it was really easy to get so focused, right? So singular focused on I want to get to this role that you almost, you stop having fun in the roles you're in because you're so focused on the next role. And I don't remember who told me. It might even could have been my dad for all I know. It was liking it to a kid, right? Little kids are so excited about Halloween because they get to dress up and go get candy, and then the next holiday they're excited about is Christmas. Well, ask a kid, and I have kids. Ask them about what they did for Thanksgiving and who came over. Most of the kids will be like, "I don't remember Thanksgiving. I don't remember who came over." Yeah, because you were so focused on Christmas, and as they should, as they're little kids. I think in careers sometimes we do that. We're so excited about the role that we're in and then the role that we want to get to that we forget that there's a role in between that. And so my career advice would be every role that you get to or everything you do it for the right reasons. Do it because it's the role you want to do. And it's because of you want to be in that role and be super successful and hyper focused on that position that it will lead to the next position. Because what you don't want to do is look back and go, oh yeah, I remember when I was blank, but I don't remember that time because I was so focused on the next job that I don't know I did that job, did it justice. And look, I'm guilty of that. I know for certain there's a position that I had that I did it because I had to do it because it got me to the next role. And I look back and go, I could have had a lot more fun and I probably could have made a lot bigger impact and I could have done a lot better in that job had I just focused on that role. Not it was a means to an end. So that would be my career advice for anybody is do every job to the best of the ability. So when you look back, you don't have to say, I gave it about 75% because I was focused on the next role. No, I gave every role 100% and left my mark and made an impact, which led me to the next role, into the next role, and the next role.
Bloom where you're planted, right? Be present, do your best where you are. If you're a flower in the best garden in the world, bloom there. But if you're in the middle of the sidewalk, on a busy street, you can bloom there too, right?
Yep. Great point. You said it much better than I did.
That's what. No, it's not my saying. I've Dabo Sweeney, football coach. He was always talking about bloom where you're planted, right? So that's great advice. Well, Ben, it's been awesome having you on. I love the Billy Bean story. He's a hero of mine. So glad to hear the story that I'm glad you didn't say he was a jerk or something. You would have ruined my thing because the whole thing. Don't meet your heroes, right? You met your hero, and he's a good guy. Thankfully,
I'll try to reach out to my buddy and see if maybe I can get Billy to sign a book or something and get it sent to you.
Get him on the podcast. I don't know about rental, but maybe fun to have on here. But anyways, Ben, thanks again for coming on today.
Kyle, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.